The desert was alive with silence, a vast, unbroken expanse of golden sand and cracked earth under the relentless gaze of the sun. The train roared through the barren landscape, its steel wheels grinding against the tracks, a mechanical beast cutting through the stillness of the wild. Inside the cabin, Jack Reynolds, a seasoned train engineer, kept his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had seen many things in his years on the rails: storms, derailments, even the occasional wildlife crossing. But nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. As the train rounded a bend, Jack's heart skipped a beat. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, and through the haze, he saw them, wild Mustangs, standing motionless on the tracks. Not running, not startled, but firm, as if they had chosen this moment to make a stand. Jack's hands tightened on the controls. He sounded the horn, but the horses didn't flinch. They stood their ground, their eyes locked on the approaching train. Jack slammed the emergency brakes. The train shuddered violently, metal screeching against metal, sparks flying as the massive locomotive fought to slow down. Dust exploded into the air, coating the tracks and the surrounding desert. When the train finally came to a halt, Jack's heart was pounding. He stepped out of the cabin, the heat of the desert hitting him like a wall. And then he saw it. The reason the Mustangs had risked their lives to stop the train. In the middle of the herd, lying helplessly on the tracks, was a small, injured foal. But this was no ordinary foal. This was a foal that would change Jack's life forever. What happened next would test his courage, his compassion, and his understanding of the wild. Would he be able to save the foal? And more importantly, would the Mustangs let him? Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming and thrilling tales like this one. And don't forget to share this story with someone who loves the untamed beauty of nature. Now, let's find out what happens next. The sun blazed over the dry, cracked earth, the sky a pale, cloudless blue stretching endlessly above the desert. The metal rails shimmered in the heat, running in a straight line through the desolate landscape. Inside the locomotive's cabin, Jack Reynolds, a seasoned train engineer with years of experience, wiped the sweat from his brow and kept his eyes on the horizon. He had seen wild Mustangs before, running free through these lands. It was a sight that always amazed him. But today something wasn't right. A dense cloud of dust had risen ahead on the tracks. Jack narrowed his eyes, gripping the controls a little tighter as the train approached. He could make out shapes moving through the haze. Then his breath caught in his throat. A herd of Mustangs was standing motionless on the tracks. There were at least 10 adult horses forming an impenetrable barrier, their ears pointed toward the train, muscles tense, nostrils flaring. Jack instinctively sounded the horn, expecting the loud blast to startle them into running. But they didn't move. Something was wrong. As the train thundered closer, Jack squinted, trying to see past the wall of horses. Then he saw it. Something was lying on the tracks right in the middle of the herd. Jack's heart pounded as he slammed the emergency brakes. The train shuddered violently, metal screeching against metal, sparks flying from the wheels. The cabin rattled as the massive locomotive struggled to slow down in time. The Mustangs stood their ground as dust exploded into the air, coating the dry desert floor. The engine roared as the train fought against its own momentum, inching toward the herd. Jack held his breath. Would it stop in time? With one final jolt, the train lurched to a halt. For a moment, everything was silent, the only sound being the wind whistling through the open plains. Jack exhaled sharply, his pulse still racing. He had never seen anything like this before. Hands shaking, Jack pulled the brake lever to lock the train in place and pushed open the cabin door. He stepped out, the heat of the sun immediately hitting him. His boots crunched against the gravel as he took cautious steps forward. The Mustangs hadn't moved an inch. They remained in their formation, standing protectively over something. Jack swallowed hard and edged closer. The horses eyed him wearily, but didn't back away. Then he saw what they were protecting. Lying helplessly between the Mustang's legs, right on the tracks, was a small, injured foal. Jack's breath hitched. The little horse's sides rose and fell weakly, its legs trembling as it tried and failed to move. It was clear, if the train hadn't stopped, the foal wouldn't have survived. Jack stood frozen, his mind racing. These Mustangs knew exactly what they were doing. They hadn't just been blocking the train. They had been protecting one of their own. The train couldn't move forward without endangering the foal, but stepping too close to the herd could also be dangerous. Jack needed to act fast. Taking a deep breath, Jack raised both hands slowly, trying to show the Mustangs that he wasn't a threat. His voice was calm and steady. "Easy now," he murmured, taking a careful step forward. One of the lead stallions, a massive black Mustang with scars on his muzzle, snorted loudly and took a step toward Jack, blocking his path. Jack stopped in his tracks. The stallion wasn't attacking, but he wasn't backing down either. Jack could feel the intelligence in the horse's eyes, the raw, primal instinct of a wild animal that had learned to survive in the harsh desert. He understood this wasn't just about fear. The Mustangs didn't trust humans. Jack sighed, glancing down at the foal again. The little one's ears flicked, sensing movement, but it didn't lift its head. Time was running out. Jack turned his head slightly toward the train, looking for help. That's when he noticed his radio sitting on the steps of the cabin. Slowly, carefully, he took a step back and grabbed the radio, pressing the button. "Dispatch, this is Reynolds. We've got a situation. A herd of Mustangs is blocking the tracks, and they're protecting an injured foal." A static-filled pause, then the dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Repeat that, Jack. Did you say a foal?" Jack exhaled. "Yeah, a young one. It's hurt, and the Mustangs won't leave its side." Another pause. "What's your plan?" Jack glanced at the foal again. Its breathing was getting weaker. He had no idea what his plan was, but one thing was clear. He had to earn the trust of these wild horses before it was too late. Jack stood frozen in place, gripping the radio tightly. The Mustangs hadn't moved. The black stallion, the leader of the herd, held his ground, eyes locked onto Jack with a look that sent a shiver down his spine. He wasn't just defending the foal. He was warning Jack. Jack exhaled slowly, keeping his movement steady. He had been around horses before, but these weren't domesticated animals. These were wild Mustangs, unpredictable, untamed, and completely disconnected from human contact. And yet, they were still here, still standing their ground, still refusing to leave the injured foal behind. Jack could see the exhaustion in the stallion's stance. The entire herd had probably been running for miles, trying to find safety, only for the youngest of them to collapse on the railroad tracks. If Jack didn't do something soon, the foal's weakened body wouldn't be able to withstand the heat much longer. His radio crackled. "Jack, what's the situation now?" Jack raised the device to his lips. "Still the same. They aren't moving, and I don't think they will. Do you need backup?" Another pause. "Jack, are you sure you don't want backup?" He hesitated. If more people arrived, the Mustangs might panic. Bringing in loud trucks or emergency responders could cause them to stampede in fear, which could be deadly for the foal. "No, too risky. Let me try something first." He clipped the radio to his belt and took a slow step forward. The stallion snorted loudly, pawing at the ground. Dust kicked up around his hooves. The other Mustangs edged forward. Jack stopped again. He knew he had to show them he wasn't a threat. He took off his hat and slowly crouched, lowering himself to their level. Then, in the calmest voice he could manage, he spoke. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The Mustangs twitched their ears, uncertain. Jack reached for the only thing he had with him, his canteen. He unscrewed the cap and poured a small stream of water into his hand. The dry desert air absorbed it quickly, but he left his hand outstretched. The foal's ear flicked. Jack noticed the little one was watching him. For a long moment, the herd remained motionless. Then the foal tried to move. It barely lifted its head, its body too weak. But Jack could see it was desperate. The Mustangs noticed too. The stallion flicked his tail, glancing down at the young horse. Jack saw his opportunity. "I can help," he said softly, "but I need you to let me." The black stallion snorted again, his eyes flicking between Jack and the foal. It was a test. Jack knew that in the wild, trust wasn't given freely. It had to be earned. Carefully, he took another step, then another. The stallion didn't move. The Mustangs remained tense, but weren't stopping him this time. Jack finally reached the foal. The little horse's condition was even worse than he thought. Its ribs were visible beneath its dusty coat. The wound on its hind leg was swollen and caked in dried blood. Flies buzzed around its ears, and its breathing was weak and uneven. Jack knelt down slowly, placing a hand on the foal's neck. The herd stirred slightly, but didn't attack. Jack poured a few drops of water into his palm and gently pressed it to the foal's mouth. The young Mustang barely had the strength to react, but then Jack felt it, a tiny movement. The foal's lips touched his palm. It was weak, barely there, but it was drinking. Jack let out a shaky breath. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Above him, the stallion watched carefully. Jack knew what happened next would decide everything. The herd had given him a chance, but if he wanted to save the foal, he had to prove they hadn't made a mistake. Jack could feel the heat radiating from the foal's body. The little one was dehydrated, exhausted, and barely holding on. The desert sun was merciless, hanging high in the sky, burning everything beneath it. The metal rails of the tracks shimmered like molten silver. Even the Mustangs, though powerful and built for survival, were starting to show signs of fatigue. But they wouldn't leave. They stayed in their formation, standing guard over the injured foal, watching Jack's every move. Jack's mind raced. He had gained their trust, but now what? He knew he couldn't just lift the foal and walk away. The Mustangs might see that as a threat, even an act of aggression. They had given him space, but they weren't fully convinced. And Jack wasn't sure how much longer the foal could last. Carefully, he reached for his radio, pressing the button. Dispatch, I need an emergency water supply. A pause, then the dispatcher's voice crackled back. Jack, are you sure you don't want backup? He looked at the Mustangs, silent, unmoving, waiting. Bringing in a rescue team might send them into a panic. If the herd stampeded, the foal wouldn't survive. No backup, Jack said firmly. Just the water. Copy that. We'll get it to you ASAP. Jack clipped the radio to his belt and turned his attention back to the foal. It was barely responsive now, its breathing shallower than before, and its small body trembled even while lying motionless on the tracks. Jack couldn't wait. He poured the last of his water into his hands and gently touched the foal's muzzle again. This time, there was no response. Jack felt a cold panic creep into his chest. No, come on, kid, he muttered, running a hand over the foal's neck. Stay with me. Then movement. The foal's ear twitched slightly. It was faint, but Jack held on to that small sign of life. The stallion huffed loudly, shifting his weight. The herd was growing restless. Jack understood. They were afraid. This foal was one of their own. If it died, they would mourn. And yet, they were still trusting him to do something. Jack knew he had only one option left. Slowly, he removed his outer shirt, rolling it into a makeshift sling. He knew if he tried to lift the foal too quickly, the Mustangs might misinterpret his actions as aggression. So he moved slowly, deliberately, giving them time to see what he was doing. But the moment he slid his arms under the foal's fragile body, the stallion reacted. The black Mustang snorted loudly and stomped a hoof, lowering his head. Jack froze. The entire herd tensed, their bodies coiled like springs. Jack locked eyes with the stallion. The energy between them was raw, electric, a moment of pure instinct. Jack wasn't a threat. He wasn't a predator. He was trying to save their foal. The stallion snorted again, but didn't move forward. Jack swallowed hard and tightened his grip on the foal. Then, with one slow, steady motion, he lifted it off the ground. The foal was light, too light for a young horse its size. Malnourished, weak, its head lulled against Jack's chest as he carefully stepped backward, cradling the small body against him. The Mustangs watched completely silent. Jack took another step, then another. The stallion pawed the ground once, then stepped aside. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The herd was letting him pass. They had made their decision. Jack turned and began walking toward the train, carrying the foal in his arms. Behind him, the Mustangs stood still, watching, waiting. Jack knew what they were thinking. Would they ever see their foal again? And more importantly, would it survive? The foal's breathing was still shallow and uneven. Every second that passed felt like a gamble, life or death hanging in the balance. Jack clenched his jaw. He had to keep this little one alive. The roar of an approaching truck rumbled in the distance. A cloud of dust rose from the desert road as the supply vehicle finally arrived. Jack didn't wait for it to fully stop before rushing forward. A crew member jumped out, holding 2 large containers of fresh water. "Where is it?" the man asked. Jack motioned toward the train platform. "There. We don't have much time." The worker sprinted over while Jack grabbed a damp cloth and knelt beside the foal. Carefully, he dabbed cool water along its neck and chest, just enough to regulate its temperature without shocking its system. The foal shuddered, but didn't resist. Jack poured a tiny stream of water into his hand and brought it back to the foal's lips. The young horse's ears twitched, then a flicker of movement. The foal's tongue touched the water, then weakly lapped at it. Jack felt his chest tighten. It was working. He let out a slow breath, relief washing over him. "It's drinking," he murmured. The crew member handed him a small portable bowl. Jack carefully tilted it forward, letting the water reach the foal's lips. Another slow sip, then another. The foal's breathing was still weak, but steadier than before. Jack glanced toward the horizon. The Mustangs were still there, still watching, waiting. The black stallion hadn't moved, neither had the others. They were waiting for their foal to come back. Jack knew what he had to do. He turned to the crew member. "It's stable enough, but it's not safe here. We need to get it back to the herd." The man hesitated. "Are you sure? What if they react badly?" Jack looked at the Mustangs again. Their stance wasn't aggressive. It wasn't fearful. It was hopeful. "They'll know," Jack said firmly. "They'll know I'm bringing it back." He carefully scooped the foal into his arms once again, feeling its tiny body pressed against his chest. Then, without another word, he started walking back toward the waiting Mustangs. Jack could feel the foal's heartbeat, weak, unsteady, fading. Every step he took away from the Mustangs felt heavier, the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. The herd had trusted him. Now it was up to him to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. The Mustangs didn't follow. Jack glanced back over his shoulder. They were still standing near the tracks, watching in complete silence. The black stallion was at the front, his body tense, nostrils flaring. Jack knew what he was thinking. Bring our foal back. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead, and Jack could feel the heat radiating from the foal's frail body. He had to move fast. As he reached the train, the dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio at his hip. "Jack, we've got water on the way. ETA, 10 minutes. 10 minutes might be too long." Jack didn't respond. Instead, he climbed up onto the first platform of the train, still cradling the foal in his arms. His mind raced through everything he knew about horses. Cooling down too fast could send it into shock. Not cooling down fast enough could kill it. He needed a solution now. His eyes darted to the small emergency water reserve in the train's cabin. Not much, but enough. Jack carefully lowered the foal onto a makeshift bed of his own jacket and unscrewed the cap of the water bottle. He poured a small amount into his palm and gently brought it to the foal's mouth. Nothing. Jack's stomach twisted. "Come on, kid. Stay with me." He dipped his fingers in the water and ran them along the foal's cracked lips. A flicker of movement. Jack's heart pounded. Then the foal's tongue barely moved, just enough to take in the moisture. It was drinking. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jack sighed in relief, but knew the foal needed more than water. Its breathing was still weak, and its small body trembled with every rise and fall of its ribs. The dispatcher's voice crackled again. "Jack, you there?" Jack grabbed the radio. "Yeah, the foal is alive, but barely." "Where's that water?" 2 minutes out." Jack exhaled sharply, brushing a hand over his face. 2 minutes. He turned his head, looking back toward the Mustangs. They hadn't moved. They were still standing there, unmoving, watching him. The stallion shifted slightly, as if waiting for Jack's next move. Jack swallowed hard. They weren't going anywhere, and somehow he understood why. They weren't just watching. They were hoping, waiting for proof that their foal was still alive, waiting to see if Jack would keep his promise. Jack set the radio down and turned back to the foal. It wasn't giving up yet, and neither would he. Jack's boots crunched against the dry desert ground as he walked, carrying the fragile foal in his arms. The Mustang stood in the distance, still waiting. The black stallion at the front lifted his head slightly, his muscles tense. Jack's breath was slow and steady. He wasn't just returning a foal. He was returning a piece of their family. The foal shifted weakly in his arms, its small body a little stronger now, its breathing less labored. Jack didn't stop. He kept walking, and the Mustangs didn't move. When he was close enough, Jack hesitated. The stallion snorted, pawing the ground, his dark eyes locked onto the foal. Ears flicking forward, the herd remained silent, as if holding their breath. Jack knelt down carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the foal's warm breath against his arm. Then, in one gentle, deliberate motion, he lowered the foal to the ground. For a moment, it didn't move. The foal's legs trembled as it tried to find its balance. Its ears twitched, then it lifted its head. The herd stirred. The black stallion took a step forward, his nostrils flaring. A mare from the herd, probably the foal's mother, stepped forward, her muscles trembling with anticipation. Jack held his breath. Then the foal took another step. The mother closed the gap between them and lowered her head, touching her muzzle gently to the foal's. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. The foal let out a soft, breathy whimper, a sound of recognition. The mare nuzzled it, encouraging it to stand stronger. Jack could see it now. The foal was home. The stallion tossed his head back, releasing a deep, resounding neigh. The other Mustangs moved in closer, forming a protective circle around the young one. The black stallion's eyes flicked to Jack one last time. Jack didn't need words to understand. "Thank you." Then, without hesitation, the stallion turned, gave one final huff, and led the herd back into the wild. Jack stood at the edge of the tracks, watching as the Mustangs disappeared into the vast expanse of the desert. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the landscape. The foal, now strong enough to stand, trotted beside its mother, its small legs moving with newfound strength. The herd moved as one, their silhouettes blending with the fading light, a testament to the unbreakable bond of family and trust. Jack exhaled deeply, the weight of the day finally lifting from his shoulders. He had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment where the wild and the human worlds had collided, not in conflict, but in mutual understanding. The Mustangs had trusted him, and he had honored that trust. It was a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, compassion and courage could bridge the gap between species. As he turned back to the train, Jack felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. The crew watched him, their faces a mix of awe and respect. But Jack's thoughts were still with the Mustangs, their powerful forms fading into the distance. He knew he would carry this moment with him for the rest of his life, a reminder of the untamed beauty of the wild and the lessons it could teach us. The train's engine roared to life, pulling Jack back to the present. He climbed into the cabin, his hands steady on the controls. The tracks stretched ahead, leading him back to the world of schedules and deadlines. But as the train picked up speed, Jack couldn't help but glance one last time at the horizon, where the Mustangs had disappeared. Some bonds, he realized, could never be broken. And sometimes, the wild had a way of teaching us more than we could ever teach it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible tales of courage, trust, and the untamed beauty of nature. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of the power of compassion and the bonds that connect us all. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Jack's shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts.